Hey, how come my penis gets big sometimes and points up in the air?
That's called an erection.
Sometimes I touch my penis because it feels good.
Sometimes when I'm in my bath or when Mom puts me to bed, I like to touch my vulva too.
What the f? Hey, what is going on, everybody? James here with Heavyweight Politics, and what you saw right there was a video clip of a video shown to not 6th graders, not 5th graders, not 3rd graders, but 1st grade students at a New York City private school. Now, I've said for a long time, right, get your kids out of public schools. Right? I think a lot of us have now realized you need to get your kids out of public schools, because what they have been taught, or what they're not being taught, is actual education, and what they are having happen at this point is indoctrination, right? The whole point of the public school system at this point is to almost hide what they're doing, hide what they're teaching to your children. Getting kids out of public schools has to be a #1 priority for almost everyone who has children at this point. I just had a kid get born. My son was born just like a few weeks ago. I'm a new parent, new dad. I'm loving every second of it. But me and my wife have already talked about the fact our kid will not be going to a public school. He will not be going to a public school system. They are awful. They are terrible. There are, of course, a few good teachers out there, no doubt. I had a few teachers who are fantastic. My mom is a public school teacher. I totally think there are good people in the system. However, the public school system as a whole is atrocious. It is awful. It is terrible. So normally we would say, hey, send your kid on to a private school, right? A private school, they're fantastic. Private schools, yay, private school, yeah, more school choice. 100% agree for the most part. But this is a case of where that type of video, that type of content was not shown in a public school. It was actually shown in a private school over in New York City. So we got the article over here from the Daily Mail. Parents fury at New York City's woke Dalton school after 1st graders are taught about masturbation during sex ed class that also instructs kids that they can't be hugged without consent. So, parents at an elite private school in New York City are furious that 1st graders are being shown sex education videos that appear to include information about things such as masturbation. I don't want to say it too much, because guess what? Saying that will get you almost banned off YouTube, but of course in the public school system, or not even the public school, in school system, it's apparently allowed without any issue. Justine Ang Fonte, a health and wellness teacher at the Dalton School, allegedly showed students this video last fall from a free sex education series for children called Amaze, in which a cartoon boy asks about erections. These are just a couple of clips from it right here, and I'm not going to read them because I'll be honest, it feels wrong to even say out loud. It's just awful stuff to think that, and look at the animation style. I mean, oh God, it's just disgusting. It is absolutely just disgusting that this is what's being shown to 1st graders. Again, you could make somewhat of an argument later on down the road. I still personally think sex education should not be in any schools for the most part. I think that's something that you as a parent should have a discussion with your kid about. And if you don't want to, tough luck, right? You're a parent, start acting like one. It is our job as parents to, of course, teach our kids to the best of our abilities. Right now we have a big issue where we're now relying on the public school system, the private school system. We're relying on other people to educate our children, and that is a big issue, because this sort of stuff is being shown to them. This sort of stuff is being shown to children at this point. Absolutely just bizarre things to be showing to 1st graders. So imagine you have a 1st grade kid. Imagine how young that kid is. Imagine them coming up to you and asking you questions involving stuff like this. That is a discussion that should have been started by you. The school had no reason to jump in the way of that, right? So these parents have started actually coming out against this school. This one quote here: "I'm paying $50,000 to these assholes to tell my kids to not let her grandfather hug her when he sees her." Again, this is where confusion gets built in, because of course what they're going to couch this as is, hey, we're telling kids, of course, to avoid being, assaulted, right? Because that is an issue. Majority of assaults unfortunately happen with someone who the child usually knows. So they're building into their material that sort of lesson plan, but without any nuance, because they're not the children's parents. They're not the children's parents. They have no ability to really create that nuance for them, right? So this is, again, why a one-size-fits-all policy doesn't work in the first place, especially when it comes to something like sex education for children. This is something that should be, brought up by the parents, talked about, with just in a family household. This is not something that should be being taught in our schools, period. But this is an issue that has grown well past just, what we see here. This is an issue that's grown, of course, well past, obviously, the public school system. It used to be this sort of stuff you would only see in the public school system. This is a very, very high-level private school, a school that I know for a fact there's no way, it would be very tough for me and my wife to afford to send our kid to, right? This is a high-level private school, and even they are buying into this garbage that this sort of stuff should be taught. It's starting to verge on the side of grooming. It really is, and because what's happening is kids, they're being taught constantly about sex, right? Sex this, sex that. We're going to teach you about, your own. They go overboard with it, and when that happens is they're being numb to the idea of sex and sexual encounters. Now this right here is actually a whole lesson plan that is actually made, I believe, for juniors in high school. Yeah, high school students, about pornography literacy, right? This is the sort of stuff they're going on and on about. So this isn't something that's a one-time class either. It's something that's going to be continuous throughout all of their education, where they're going on and on and on about sexual, sexual content. And this is the actual slides from what they were taught. Some of the stuff I can't mention in a video without worrying about it could possibly be banned off YouTube or Facebook or anything like that, right? I mean, that's how bad this stuff is. I mean, that right there, that's being taught to children. And I know people say, well, they're high schoolers, they're not children. Listen, I was a high school, guess what? We acted like freaking children, right? We didn't know nothing, all right? That's just how it was. Guess what also? They're juniors. They're underage. We are showing and talking about this sort of stuff to people who are underage, who shouldn't even be viewing that sort of stuff to begin with. And I know what people are going to say. Well, of course they're viewing it. They're always viewing it. People start viewing that stuff when they're 13, as depressing as that really is. It is the truth, right? I think that's how it was for almost all of us who are of my generation, right? But here's the problem. As pornography has increased, what you're noticing is a rapid onset of people who are having terrible issues, such as ED problems, in their 20s and 30s, right? And there is a direct correlation between that and overuse of pornography, especially at a younger age, where you're still kind of developing those parts of your brain that are connecting, those different aspects of life, to a point where people will not get fulfillment in physical attachments. They'll only get fulfillment through watching or through video. That's one of the issues of people who are underage watching this sort of material. It's not so much because of the, oh, heaven forbid they see something naughty. No, it's not that. It's also about the fact of how are they going to develop over time. Talking about stuff like this with them, and that, I mean, good God, you're talking about. I can't even mention it. I can't even mention it without the risk of things getting demonetized, right? Obviously, this channel isn't big enough to be monetized in the first place, I guess. So I guess I could get away with it, but it's still a risk, right? It's still, you can't talk about this sort of stuff on YouTube, yet this is what's being taught in a school. And again, this is another private school. This is a high school. This is a private high school where they're going over these type of lessons. I mean, look at this. Look, this is what they're really talking about. It is absolutely insane. So again, you're now having children, and that's what they are, 15, 16-year-olds being taught this sort of material. This does verge on grooming. This does verge on the idea of getting kids, comfortable with the idea of sexual encounters before, of course, someone who is, of course, in a position of power starts making advances, right? Grooming, this is the prime example of what grooming really is. And we allow it to be done in our school system, where we already have probably record number of people who are already abusing students as is, all right? I can easily say I was in a kind of a small town, we had multiple cases of teachers and student interactions, we'll say. It's not a good thing. It's awful. It's terrible. But it is very, very, very high in the school system, which is part of why stuff about sex should be completely outside the realm of school system. This is stuff that should be talked about with your kids, you know, just you and them. Now, I don't know what exactly you plan on doing, of course, for your children. What I can say is, now this is brought up discussion between me and my wife. What are we going to do with our kids, you know, when they get old enough to the point where we got to worry about what school we're sending them? Obviously, public school, off the table. No way doing public school, all right? Public school system is one of the... Our public school system is, again, one of the worst there is in the world. It is an absolutely awful, awful system. But the private school system is getting to a point where they're not really getting that much better. They're getting worse and worse year over year, and it's really sad to see. Maybe religious schools, you know, so far they tend to have a very high rate of success, right? You know, grade point average seems to be very high among religious schools, as well as just, you know, overall success of a student after the fact, right? They seem to actually be teaching them more traditional education, right? And that's what it really should be. But I really think the key to this equation is us as parents have to get more involved, right? We have to be very involved with our kids while they're going through, you know, this part of their life. Because let's face it, they are around these teachers, are around these people that you barely know more often than they are around you. You are literally giving your kid to a stranger for more time, you know, to spend more time with them than they will spend with you. That is a bad thing. Or it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a bad thing if we just don't check in on it and make sure that what they're doing is right for your kid. We have to be having those discussions around a nice dining table, you know, at dinner. You know, okay, what did you learn today at school? What did you learn today? What did you learn, you know, what's new today? Make sure they're constantly asking questions to figure out, okay, what are they trying to teach your child? Because Lord knows what's actually skating by that you don't know about. This is just the stuff that parents have complained about. Lord knows what's being said in private. And we already have, you know, leaked Zoom calls of teachers talking about, oh God, I don't want their parents to know what we're teaching them, right? That has already happened. So who knows what's already flying underneath that radar? We got to make sure we're asking these questions of our kids and following up, and just make sure that, you know, what they're being taught is what they should be being taught, and not insane, just I'm just gonna say it, almost criminal stuff like this. Again, this is stuff that if you went and talked to a kid about outside of a school setting, you would be in jail. Yet because it's in a school setting, we just fully allow it. This is not something that should be taught in school. This is something that should be totally taught between the parents and their kids. That's it. No one else should be having, a stranger should not be having this kind of discussion with your child. I'll put it that way. Would you give your child away to a stranger to have this kind of talk with? I don't think many people would. It's just we've gotten comfortable with the idea of the school system raising our children for us, when the reality is, that's on us. We need to be raising our own children. Whether that means you're going to homeschool, or whether that means that you're just going to be more attentive to what your kid's actually learning while they are in school and checking up on them, going to PTA meetings, being as engaged as possible. Of course, we all have busy lives. We got to find a way around it, because at the end of the day, you know, our children are more important than anything else there are in the world, right? I mean, the reality is you can do a lot of stuff to me. You can bother me quite a bit. But at the end of the day, I'm just kind of, I'll be honest, it's like water off a duck's back. I'm really not going to care that much. You start doing something to my kid, that's when we got problems, right? So we got to make sure that we are actually attentive in our kids' lives to make sure that we can really spot this stuff when it happens. Of course, you liked this video, make sure you leave a like down below, because that really does help when it comes to the algorithm. It really helps us get more exposure, and you know, that's what we really want. We want to actually really grow this channel into something bigger, and we need y'all's help to really get that accomplished. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you again real soon.